I did not learn leadership from books written in comfort. I did not learn it from palaces or from men who inherited power without sacrifice. I learned leadership by studying men who carried the heaviest responsibility. A human being can carry the responsibility of guiding humanity while standing answerable before Allah. I speak today not as a man who believes he has arrived, but as a man who is still walking. Leadership is not a destination. It is a burden, and only those who understand this burden are fit to carry it. When I looked at the state of the world, oppression, corruption, broken nations, forgotten people, I asked myself a painful question. Where did leadership lose its soul? The answer did not come from modern politics. It came from the lives of the prophets of Allah. The prophets were not sent to dominate people, they were sent to serve truth. They were not obsessed with control, they were obsessed with justice. This is where real leadership begins. Leadership begins with accountability. The first leader of humanity, Prophet Adam alayhi salam, taught me something that shook me deeply. When he made a mistake, he did not deny it. He did not blame society. He did not hide behind excuses. He accepted responsibility and turned back to Allah. From the very first human being, Allah showed us that leadership without humility is a lie. A leader who cannot say I was wrong is dangerous. A leader who refuses accountability is already corrupt. Then I reflected on Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. For centuries, he stood alone. He was mocked. He was laughed at. He was rejected by his own people. Yet he did not abandon his mission. He did not compromise the truth to be liked. He did not dilute his message to gain followers. From Nuh, I learned that patience is power. Today, leaders want instant applause. The prophets accepted long suffering. Nuh taught me that leadership is not measured by how fast people follow you, but by how firmly you stand when they don't. Then I reached the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, a man whose courage still shakes the foundation of falsehood. Ibrahim stood against an entire civilization alone. He questioned idols not with rage but with reason. He challenged falsehood without fear. When he was thrown into the fire, he did not beg the people. He placed his trust entirely in Allah. This taught me a lesson modern leaders desperately need. Truth does not need numbers to survive. Sometimes, leadership means standing alone, knowing you may be misunderstood, isolated, even attacked, yet refusing to surrender your principles. Ibrahim also taught me the deepest lesson of leadership: sacrifice. He was willing to give up what he loved most, not because he was weak, but because he trusted Allah completely. Leadership demands sacrifice, comfort, safety, popularity, and sometimes even your own peace. A leader who is not ready to sacrifice should never ask to lead. Then I studied Prophet Musa alayhi salam, a man who confronted tyranny directly. Pharaoh had power, wealth, armies, and fear on his side. Musa had none of these. He had truth, and truth, when carried sincerely, is stronger than any throne. Musa spoke to a tyrant without hatred. He demanded justice without cruelty. He showed me that leadership is not driven by revenge, but by responsibility. Musa also taught me humility. Despite his mission, he asked Allah for support. He accepted help. He trusted his brother Harun. This shattered a dangerous myth. No leader succeeds alone. Leadership is not ego. Leadership is cooperation. When I reached the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, my heart felt heavy. Betrayed by his own blood, thrown into slavery, imprisoned unjustly. Yet when Allah placed authority in his hands, he chose forgiveness over revenge. This is where leadership is truly tested, not in hardship, but in power. Yusuf taught me that authority reveals character. Power does not make someone righteous or corrupt. It exposes what was already inside. He also taught me that leadership requires competence. He asked for responsibility not for pride, but because he was capable and trustworthy. A leader must be honest enough to know his limits and strong enough to fulfill his duties. Prophet Dawud alayhi salam taught me justice without favoritism. He ruled fairly even when judgment went against him. He showed me that leadership without justice is oppression, even if it is done in the name of good intentions. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam taught me humility at the peak of success. Despite unmatched power, he never claimed it as his own achievement. He understood that leadership is a test, not a trophy. And then I reached the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most complete example of leadership humanity has ever known. He led with mercy without weakness. He ruled with strength without cruelty. He lived simply while governing greatly. He listened to the poor. Before the powerful, he forgave when revenge was easy. He served his people instead of standing above them. From him, I learned the final truth about leadership. A leader is a servant. A leader walks among his people, feels their pain, carries their fears, protects their dignity. Leadership is not about being remembered. It is about being responsible before Allah. These lessons are not history to me. They are guidance. If leadership today returned to the principles of the prophets, nations would heal. People would rise. Oppression would fall. This is why I say with certainty, leadership without faith is empty. Power without morality is destruction. And when I look at the world today, I realize something painful. Leadership has become loud, but empty. Powerful, but hollow. Leaders speak endlessly, yet say nothing that heals. They promise change, yet protect systems that crush the weak. Somewhere along the way, leadership forgot its purpose. The prophets never forgot. They were not perfect men living perfect lives. They were tested in ways that would break most leaders today. Hunger, exile, betrayal, loss, loneliness. These were their classrooms. And that is why their leadership still speaks to the human heart. I learned from them that leadership is restraint. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had the power to destroy his enemies, yet he chose forgiveness. That choice was not weakness. It was control over the ego. A leader who cannot control his anger will always misuse his authority. Today, many leaders rule through fear because fear is easier than trust. The prophets ruled through trust because trust creates loyalty that fear never can. I learned that a leader must be morally ahead of his people, not morally equal to their lowest instincts. When people are angry, the leader must be calm. When people want revenge, the leader must choose justice. When people lose hope, the leader must become hope. This is what Prophet Musa ﷺ showed. When his people complained, doubted, and disobeyed, yet he continued to guide them with patience. Leadership is not abandoning people when they become difficult. Leadership is standing firm when guiding them becomes painful. From the prophets, I also learned the danger of arrogance. Every tyrant in history believed himself untouchable. Pharaoh believed power made him divine. Qarun believed wealth made him superior. History buried them all. Power does not elevate a leader. Character does. A leader who forgets all will eventually forget the people. I ask myself every day, if power were taken from me tomorrow, would I still recognize myself? This question keeps a leader awake at night. And it should, because leadership is temporary, but accountability is eternal. The prophets lived with this awareness. They spoke knowing every word mattered. They acted knowing every decision would be judged. That consciousness created leadership that healed nations. I also learned that leadership is not about pleasing everyone. The prophets were loved by the sincere and hated by those who benefited from corruption. A leader who tries to satisfy everyone will betray truth. First, truth has a cost. Prophet Ibrahim paid that cost with fire. Prophet Yusuf paid it with prison. Prophet Musa paid it with exile. Prophet Muhammad paid it with boycott, hunger, and war. Yet none of them sold the truth to buy comfort. This taught me that leadership requires a spine, not just strategy. Another lesson carved deeply into my heart is that a leader must protect dignity. The prophets stood for the poor, the orphan, the widow, the enslaved. They did not see people as numbers or tools. They saw human beings created by Allah. A nation collapses the moment its leaders stop seeing people as sacred. I learned that development without dignity is exploitation. Order without justice is oppression. Stability without morality is illusion. The prophets did not build civilizations on fear, they built them on values. When Prophet Muhammad entered Makkah as a victor, he bowed his head in humility. He did not celebrate conquest. He celebrated mercy. That moment taught me more about leadership than any military victory ever could. A leader must be strongest at the moment of victory, strongest against his own ego. From the prophets, I also learned that silence can be leadership. Not every moment demands a speech. Sometimes leadership is listening. Sometimes it is restraint. Sometimes it is letting justice take its course without interference. Modern leaders fear silence because silence exposes. Its intention. The prophets were comfortable with silence because their intentions were clear. I learned that leadership is not about image, it is about impact. The prophets did not manage perception, they transformed reality. And I realized something else, something deeply unsettling. Most leaders today want to be remembered. The prophet wanted to be righteous. History remembers both, but only one is honored by Allah. As I carry responsibility today, I remind myself, power is not proof of righteousness. Success is not proof of truth. Only integrity survives time. The prophets walked paths filled with pain, yet their leadership still breathes life into hearts centuries later. That is the kind of leadership this world needs again. Leadership that does not bow to injustice, leadership that does not sell truth, leadership that does not forget Allah. And there are nights when leadership feels heavier than any battlefield, nights when silence is loud, when responsibility presses on the chest, and sleep refuses to come. In those moments, I remember something the prophets understood deeply: leadership is loneliness. The prophets were surrounded by people, yet often stood alone, not because they were abandoned, but because truth isolates before it liberates. When you refuse to lie, refuse to exploit, refuse to bend to corruption, the crowd thins. And a leader must be strong enough to walk forward even when applause fades. Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ stood alone against a civilization. Prophet Musa ﷺ stood alone before a tyrant. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ stood alone when the entire city turned against him. This taught me that loneliness is not failure. Sometimes it is proof that you are standing where truth stands. I learned that leadership demands inner strength, not just outer authority. Anyone can command soldiers. Few can command their own fears. Anyone can issue orders. Few can silence their ego. The prophets mastered themselves before they led others. This is why their leadership endured. I also learned that leadership means choosing pain today so others don't suffer tomorrow. The prophets accepted hardship so their people could rise. They endured hunger so dignity could survive. They tolerated insults so justice could stand. Modern leadership often avoids pain at all costs and transfers it to the people. Prophetic leadership absorbs pain and shields the people. This difference changes everything. From Prophet Yusuf ﷺ, I learned another painful truth. Sometimes your own people will misunderstand you. Sometimes betrayal does not come from enemies, but from those closest to you. Yet Yusuf did not let bitterness poison his heart. He chose forgiveness, not because betrayal was small, but because Allah was greater. A leader who carries hatred cannot build a future. Hatred consumes judgment. Forgiveness frees vision. This does not mean weakness. It means clarity. The prophets never confused mercy with surrender. They forgave when forgiveness healed. They stood firm when firmness protected justice. Leadership is knowing the difference and acting without ego. I learned that anger feels powerful, but restraint is stronger. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ endured insults, mockery, and humiliation. Yet he did not allow hatred to shape his mission. He corrected injustice without becoming unjust. That balance is rare. That balance is leadership. And then there is fear. The silent enemy of every leader, fear of losing power, fear of losing control, fear of losing approval. The prophets were free from these fears because they feared Allah alone. When a leader fears people more than Allah, he becomes their prisoner. When a leader fears Allah, he becomes free. This lesson changed how I see authority. Authority is not protection. Authority is exposure. Every decision reveals who you truly serve. I ask myself constantly, am I protecting my position or am I protecting my people? The prophets never protected themselves at the expense of truth. They chose truth even when it endangered them. I learned that leadership also requires moral courage. The courage to say no when everyone expects yes. The courage to stop injustice even when it benefits the powerful. The courage to delay popularity for long-term dignity. The prophets were never obsessed with winning elections or securing loyalty. They were obsessed with leaving behind righteousness. This is why their leadership still speaks. I also learned that leadership is consistency. The prophets did not change principles to suit circumstances. They did not speak one truth in ease and another in hardship. Their private character matched their public mission. Hypocrisy destroys leadership faster than failure ever could. People can forgive mistakes. They cannot forgive betrayal of values. From the prophets, I learned that a leader must be visible in hardship. They were present when people suffered. They did not rule from distance. They walked among the hungry, the wounded, the broken. Leadership from afar becomes oppression. Leadership among the people becomes trust. And trust is the strongest foundation any nation can stand on. There is another truth the prophets taught me. A truth modern leadership avoids. You cannot lead people you despise. The prophets loved their people even when they were rejected by them. That love did not blind them to wrongdoing, but it kept their hearts clean. A leader who despises his people will eventually harm them. Got that people are not obstacles, they are responsibility. As I carry leadership today, I do not see it as a crown. I see it as a weight that must be carried with humility, patience, and fear of Allah. Because leadership will end, titles will fade, power will disappear, but accountability will remain. And this understanding changes everything.